would you like to proceed?
Yes, please.
Good evening, everyone. This is a special meeting of the Mayor and Council of Borough of Highlands, Monday, October 18th, 2021 at 6:30. This special meeting of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Highlands is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Law. Notice has been transmitted to the Asbury Park Press, to River Times, and by posting at the Borough of Highlands Municipal Building and filing with the Borough Clerk all on September 17th, 2021. This agenda is complete to the extent known. No formal action will be taken at this meeting. Council may limit repetitive comments and may limit the time or number of questions or comments from any one citizen to ensure an orderly meeting and allow adequate time for members of the public to be heard. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will now call roll. Councilmember Martin?
Here.
Councilmember Mazzola? Here. Councilmember Melnick?
Here.
Council President Olszewski? Here. Mayor Briand?
Here.
Discussion items for tonight are Bay Avenue redevelopment public input meeting.
I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. This is more of a visioning meeting where, as we have said in the past, the plan does not exist until we get input from you, the public, of what you would like to see on Bay Avenue that is outside of our existing land use regulations for the commercial business district. With that said, I'm going to turn this over to our planner, Mr. Paul Greigel, for a rundown of the process, where we are in the process, and all of that kind of good stuff.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be back here. The overview of what we're intending to cover this evening. So hopefully you can all see okay on here. So as the Mayor mentioned, we're going to talk about the redevelopment process. Actually, the Borough's Redevelopment Council will cover that as well, get a little more input from the legal side of things and make sure we're doing things properly here. But after that, talking more generally about the redevelopment area that is hopefully soon to be formally designated, and then a bit more about the Bay Avenue corridor and the area, its existing conditions. And then we want to reach out to hear from council, from the public, from everyone here about the ideas for what could be included in the redevelopment plan. So, Joe, do you want to, not necessarily follow what's written here, but provide some information about overview generally about the redevelopment process and where we are in this process in particular?
So, can you hear me? Okay. Good. Okay. So, to begin with, it's a process. It's a very long, involved process that has a lot of public input from the beginning through to the end. And we're literally just at the infancy of this process with the goal of having to breathe a new life into the business district to generate more wallets on the street, more opportunities for the businesses to grow and flourish, and ultimately for the borough to succeed. The first step in that process is to define the area that we're talking about, to identify the properties that fit certain criteria that the planner has gone through and compared to the statute. The statute lists a number of criteria that you need to meet in order to be included in the redevelopment area, or your property has to be one that, without inclusion in the property area, even though it doesn't meet the criteria, it's required to make a redevelopment project succeed. So that is the step we're at today, which is the beginning step where we're just trying to sort of define the area. The planner did a study, the planning board reviewed it, the governing body is ultimately going to designate that, presumably, if they agree. And that then just sets forth the boundaries of the redevelopment area, where we'll seek to develop redevelopment projects, not a single project, multiple projects in this case, over the course of likely many, many years. The next step of that process really is to define the new zoning. So we're all used to the current zoning, which describes the bulk standards, the height, the uses, the setbacks, all those kinds of things that are your normal land use ordinances that already exist today. But in the case of redevelopment, once we define that area, we're going to define the new zoning for that area. So we're going to develop what's called a redevelopment plan. Redevelopment plan is really zoning for an area, but it's much more detailed. It'd be much more robust than your typical zoning. It's going to have a lot more in it than perhaps a normal municipal zoning. So that's the step we're in today. Now we're going to start talking about what should go into that plan, what should be the height restrictions, what should be the setbacks, what are the appropriate uses for that area, what shouldn't be allowed in that area, how much parking should there be, what's the number of residential units that should be permitted, all that kind of stuff, where they should be on what floor, all those kinds of, that's the kind of info we're looking for today, which will then inform the planner in his efforts to draft the redevelopment plan, which is the zoning. That's still not what we're getting to, which is an ultimately a redevelopment project or projects. The next step in this process, so you know where we're going to go from here, we'll begin to engage with property owners or developers to develop individual parcels or assemble parcels and do larger projects. That process will evolve into a redevelopment agreement, which is a contract between the borough and the ultimate developer of those properties, multiple contracts for multiple properties. That's something that doesn't really exist in your normal zoning. The applicant goes to the planning board, gets their approval, to the zoning board if they need a variance, they get it, and they go through the project. In the case of redevelopment law, this governing body is going to have a lot more control over what's happening. We get into perhaps those detailed design standards, for example, into our projects. We commencement and completion dates, so there can be deadlines. You don't get your site plan book and sit on it. So that's sort of our goal. We're going to really, as Mr. Canale, control in much more granular level what's going to develop on those properties. And again, I think that's what, in this instance, ultimately, it's also multiple redevelopment agreements over time. And so that's sort of the final step we're trying to shoot for. But every one of those steps along the way, we're going to have robust community involvement. There will be council meetings, ordinances to be adopted. We may have to talk about incentive packages, things like that. The state of New Jersey, some of the new federal infrastructure money that's available. All that's going to be, put into the mix to try and hopefully jumpstart the redevelopment in this area. So we're really at this a really critical point, because this sets the template, what we can allow happen. Now, the one thing you should know, it's also becomes a living and breathing thing. So we may, along the way, add properties to the redevelopment area because someone comes along with a great idea and the property's not in it, needs to be in it. So that may happen. This redevelopment plan, we may adopt it and a month later say, hey, we came up with a better idea, or a redeveloper proposed us with a better idea that's not covered in the plan. We'll go through the process again. The one thing developers won't be able to do is get variances. They won't be able to decide, we want to build it a foot higher, we'll go to the zoning board. It won't be an option. Everything comes back to the zoning body in terms of variances, and a whole brand new plan has to get adopted. So it's great that there's so many people here involved and participating, because we really want to make sure that we set the foundation. I always describe it as, this is sort of we're going to figure out what the size and scope of the marble is before we start carving out the sides. And that's really what we're looking for everyone here to do. Help us figure out what are the outlines of what might fit in there. You're not going to get into the nuances in the plan of how many units will be built there or what particular retail use will be there. That's going to come much later. It's just sort of to try and sort of scope out what we think as a community is the appropriate envelope, if you will, within which we will then negotiate redevelopment agreements. And then after all that happens, those applicants still have to get their site plan approval. They still have to get all their governmental approvals, the TWA, the water extension permits. All that still happens, and the planning board's role it remains just as important as it was. In fact, more important, because they'll give us comments on the real plan, and then they'll ultimately decide on granting the site plan approval, which will come with the traffic studies and then all the other things that we typically expect. So again, at the beginning of a long process, really important to get as much comment and thought as we can from the group. We'll collect that all. That will inform the plan. That plan will get drafted. It has to go to an ordinance, so it's going to get introduced. It's going to get to the planning board, where you want to speak to the planning board about it. It's going to come back to the governing body, where they'll have a public hearing. So there's going to be at least two official hearings on top of the work we're going to do here tonight. So again, thanks for everyone coming. I think sort of be as creative as you can. I think this is probably just trying to brainstorm, really get a real feel for what the community expects and wants, in this area. So, thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Just one follow-up question, if I may. That came up at the last meeting of this type, where there's a lot of concern about properties, people on the properties, where they want to keep their existing use and not, be forced to change. And also, certainly, there's no eminent domain on the table. Let's start there. This is a non-condemnation redevelopment area, so from a legal point of view, the borough cannot obviously use condemnation to take property to eminent domain, right? Non-condemnation here, so.
Well, now we're just doing the plan.
Yes, so so it's clear that with that in mind, as far as going towards the plan, there was questions about property owners' rights and that type of thing, that they're not going to essentially, I phrased the question wrong, but essentially zone someone out of there, yes, sorry for the long-winded way of phrasing it. The concern, again, is to reemphasize from a legal point of view, that if you have a single-family house that's been there, for example, don't want to change anything, the plan cannot force you.
You don't want to see forced to build anything.
Right, there you go. It's more. Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll turn, just a very quick recap. I recognize some familiar faces here. You're probably familiar with the area, but just again, what we're dealing with is, assuming there's a redevelopment area designation adopted in a couple of nights, just the entire CBD zone district, 20-plus acres along Bay Avenue, 155 lots. So this is a rather aggressive redevelopment area, but it's, again, the intention was to try to do something to build upon prior planning efforts. This is the downtown area, as you're well aware, with a traditional mix of uses in some parts, where you have the upstairs residential, ground floor commercial, other parts it's older homes, other places you have parks, community facilities, those types of things. It's really a fine-grained mix of uses, not simply, 3 or 4 blocks long of just one type of development. Before we get into reaching out to hear from everyone about their ideas, I just, want to fill out there some things to start thinking about. As a planner, we look at what exists today and what your assets are and potential opportunities in preparing a redevelopment plan. We do this for master planning as well, but this is a more focused downtown corridor effort. So some of that came to me and will come out of prior meetings, out of prior planning efforts. I've just listed a few of them here. Obviously, the historic character, you have a lovely downtown corridor, a great setting here, close by to a lot of places where people from outside the area are visiting. You have existing nodes, areas of either commercial activity or open spaces. Parking, always concerned. Again, as an outside observer, there's plenty of parking supply. It just might not be, unfortunately, in the right place where people want it. It might not be right in front of a store you want to go to. But there's certainly, today, you have the opportunity to park within the streets as well as off-street. We do have a number of potential redevelopable sites. When we went through the process of the redevelopment study, there certainly are some properties that are either vacant, underutilized, or otherwise ready to be redeveloped. One other big picture I think to think about is, you're talking about uses, is even before COVID, there's a shifting nature of the retail market, but also since COVID, the workplace and offices and where people have to live. So I know you're experiencing here in Highlands, many other communities are too, where people might not have lived here before on a regular basis, say, I can live here, work, remotely at my office, that type of thing. And then it might be demand actually for office spaces, shared workspaces, things like that, that maybe weren't as viable previously. Others, I'm sure I've forgotten, there's a lot of other things that I want to hear from you as we get into this discussion, other things that you can use to build upon, other opportunities as well. But in terms of constraints, we also need to be realistic with what the issues are you have to deal with. No surprise here. You have the flooding in the past, you have flood hazard area. The fact that the redevelopment area is so large, the potential redevelopment area is so large, it's not as easy as just saying, let's focus on these 2 properties. We're talking about a large area, so it might be a plan with different regulations for different parts of it. Also, typically, large-scale redevelopers and taking big redevelopment projects want to have a lot of land put together. Well, here, obviously, it's a built-up area, and you don't have too many large developable tracts, and maybe that's fine. Maybe you don't want to look for a mega project. It might be a number of smaller projects, but it does make it a bit more difficult potentially. You also have to work within the existing patterns of where things are today. Current economic conditions. I know, hopefully one of these days we're back to a more normal environment with regard to the public health side of things. But just again, as I mentioned, even before this COVID, the retail market has shifted already. You have some issues with regard to that in smaller downtowns generally. And one thing not to forget, unfortunately, your market area we're up against the water. We're up against the water. If you draw marketers for retail usually draw a circle, a radius around an area. You've lost a bunch of that. It's unfortunate, literally out into the ocean, out into the bay. So it's not your typical, if you're 10 miles inland, you just kind of draw a circle around, and you can easily, tell retailers you're going to draw a market from a marketplace like that. And again, there may be, I'm sure there are others I'm forgetting, but just to get the discussion going, things to think about, and tell us, to inform us other things that might be constraints. Turning now to the existing zoning, I did see the Mayor and Council, you have your listing of all the permitted uses in the zone today. This is the Central Business District zone currently. It's very broad in terms of the mix of uses that are permitted. So the interesting thing is that right now, there's a lot of opportunity to build, but again, it's not maybe happening to the way that's desired. Single-family homes are permitted if they exist. Again, that came up a bunch of times in prior meetings, so again, that's what currently is permitted. But otherwise, new residential needs to be above the first floor. In other words, the mixed-use type of buildings. The bulk regulations, in terms of my analysis, as far as the setbacks, the coverage, the standards, that type of thing, are generally pretty lenient to allow for buildings up to the street. However, in terms of height, 36 feet or 38.5 feet when you're putting parking under a structure. So currently, at least, the height is relatively limited. And again, that's something to discuss to see whether that remains the same, whether it gets bumped up a little bit, goes up a lot, lowered. Potentially, theoretically, it could be changed in either direction. Just more in terms of background, just to recap some of the planning objectives for the area. I'm coming in as a relatively new planner to Highlands, but I'm not the first one to have worked here. Many people sitting here today in this room, I'm sure, have been involved in prior planning efforts. We have a master plan back in 2004, re-examinations or updates in 09 and 16. The 2016 re-examination is essentially the current master plan document. It provides a number of recommendations for enhancing Bay Avenue. There's certainly a number of other reports related to post-Sandy resiliency and flooding issues. Again, so we reviewed all of that, and it's a lot of information in there. Some of the key points out of the 2016 re-examination is trying to, again, focus a bit on Superstorm Sandy, of course, and trying to have future resiliency and planning. But also there's a number of discussion points regarding the Central Business District zone, and actually recommended form-based zoning for downtown. That's basically where it dictates what a building, its shape looks like, if you will, where the maximum, dimensions of it, as opposed to, again, the technical here, but as opposed to saying, well, you need to have a minimum setback from the street. Form-based zoning is a little more, very stringent with regard to what a building form can be. That has not been enacted to this point in time. It also did recommend utilizing redevelopment powers for different properties and areas within the borough. So that's what I had in terms of the background. So I think this way gives me plenty of time for at least an hour or so. I'll go through a regular discussion with regard to a number of topics. So, Mayor, I listed out the different types of points here. So I don't know if you want to start with the council and have a discussion on where you'd like to start with. If you'd like me just to go down the list, or we can, there's no wasting it. I have some ideas, but I'll defer to you all.
Sure. If everyone can, in the audience as well, it's a very large piece of paper here that has what's currently allowed in the CBD in the Commercial Business District. There's a ton of copies over there by the desk. And it pretty much shows all the things that are currently permitted uses in the zone or conditional uses and accessory uses. So I don't know if there's any comment from the table before we go out, or have Mr. Greigel lead the charge there. Does anyone here have any sort of use that you would like to see in this plan as either a permitted, an accessory, or a conditional use in the plan?
Nothing outside.
Sir, ma'am? No? You're all good? Okay.
We open to the public comment?
Absolutely.
Want to go down each of these topic points?
Sure.
That'd be great. So, again, we provided, what's existing in the current zoning. It's pretty open-ended with regard to commercial type of district and mix of uses. but there's things that, you'd like to, tell us about. So, these, we will need to at least,
I can speak up.
do you need to have name and address for the record on this?
Yes. My name is Maureen Bridbrook, and I live on Highland Avenue up on the hill. And, thank you.
Okay, well, be careful not to put my germs on it. Okay. My question is just, to start out, are we talking about only properties that front on Bay Avenue, or does it also include the block around that, et cetera?
The answer is that the zone district actually includes, I actually can flip on that. Show that. It's primarily a ban, but there are some that are on some of the side streets as well. Okay, so the zone's broken into two parts, so hopefully you can see it pretty well here. This is the, so there's certain parts, see how the boundaries kind of,
Here, the whole, section of properties on South Second Street, and a little portion of Shore Drive, as well as the corridor here.
so yeah, you got some
On
down.
the other side of those condos, that there is, the only thing that's off Bay Avenue is this little section here, Shore Drive, which includes Valley Bank and, Valley's property that's, vacant next to it.
Real quick, the boundaries follow what the existing central business district zone, which was created a few years back, so for now, that's the box within which we're dealing. As I mentioned, I know it could theoretically down the line if there's a desire to expand it, but right now, what's being considered by the mayor and council is just that area.
Paul,
Yes.
how far south on Bay Avenue? Oh, what's the back,
And it's a school building, it's,
south?
North, south.
oh, the other side is, South Street.
Way over, right across the park.
Right before you get to the Veterans Park.
I'm just wondering what the thought process was. Why didn't we continue all the way down?
Because this is one district, this is the central business district.
Straight down Bay Avenue?
Right, and it ends right before Veterans Park.
Right, but we could have continued down Bay Avenue, couldn't we, to include the area where we
Have
enter,
done, but we did not.
where we enter the town? I mean, that's how a lot of people enter town, right?
Right, but we were doing one district, which was the commercial business district, that already had 155 properties. And we could always do that in a whole other plan. That's not part of the business district.
But then we
No,
have,
it's called the waterfront transitional zone.
Right,
It's another district.
my concern is though it is a continuation of Bay Avenue and it is one of the primary entrances to the town. So I'm just trying to remember when we initially went through this process, why we didn't decide to do that. Why not then go all the way down where Bars is, right? Because
Because
that's
of the number of properties, that's why we didn't do it. We did one zone, that's the majority of Bay Avenue.
Oh, we originally were going to do two zones.
We were gonna do part one and part two,
Yes.
but we're still only in central business district. Forest and that little area, just
Right.
people, that's never in.
I know, but we could, if we wanted to, we could, correct?
Do a whole separate process, yeah, that would have to go through everything that, to this point, took some time to do all the research and analysis of that area. But obviously, yeah, the governing body has the ability to do that, then they time it so desires. But
That's a question that's been posed to me, that's why it was important that I bring it up.
Okay. Great, thank you. You have follow up on that, or? I got one here. Thank you. Yes.
Steve Solomon, 405 Bay Avenue. I have the same question that Linda had, is that, what you are thinking of developing a retail corridor where there's more residents than retail, and the retail has been proven to fail in that area, okay? And, is there any research to look at the development, okay, of the waterfront, where you have a delivery system where people can come in with their boats okay, and have the restaurants and, you know, the retail spaces along the waterfront, you know, talking about bars, restaurants, taking all that prime real estate and building, you know, the delivery part, okay, and go all the way down to Gravelly Point. I mean, Gravelly Point will make a beautiful little, you know, row of shops down there if we take that, you know. I mean,
Yeah, I think what happened was.
that's what other people.
So there's a limited amount of money and resources and time, right? So I think the collective wisdom was, let's start with business district. These are all going to ultimately be individual projects. It doesn't mean we won't move further. We may decide part of the business district should be no retail in the first place, should be all residential, right? So we may,
It's actually, so it's more towards residential.
and we may decide in the zoning, that we're going to have it mostly be zoned residential.
Or certain parts of the
Certain
area.
parts of it residential as opposed to retail, for example, because we want to start pushing the retail further to the waterfront district, I guess it's called. So it's really more of, there's only a certain amount of money, a certain amount of time, and we identified this as the first place to start, but I think we talked about, as it goes, you know, add more areas further down the road.
Listen, here's a lot of that is, you know, the town is primarily landlocked. I mean, if you can drive right down, once you know it's here, and it's on the C Street, you have to actually come down into the town. So where's the delivery system for the customers? I mean, that's been my question. Yeah, you have a bus line, you know, back in the day, you had the train, you know, so there's really no delivery system to bring the customers in. It's that deep into
Right, but maybe you have a destination, like a restaurant, that everyone hears about the flat out of the way it comes to, and once you get to that restaurant, you do other things, so, I mean, there's a lot of ways we can make that happen, you can't change, right, I mean, you can't change the impact of your land.
I have one concern about the, you know, systemically, how we're approaching, you know, I don't know who you are.
My name is Joe Bauman, so please don't, call me Joe.
So, you know, this is the first time I'm seeing you, but, you know, I'm very critical of the fact that nobody really knew about this meeting here until the last minute. It wasn't advertised properly, okay?
It wasn't advertised properly, okay, so that we would know about it. I understand that there's a survey that's around, okay, that, I mean, I don't know about it. I found out about it through somebody else that it was on the town website. You know, I think that if you want community involvement and you want to be, you want positive input, the citizens need to be informed. And I think with something like this, you need to send a letter to some of the people who aren't on the internet. And who don't do those things.
It's the first time, right? You're gonna hear about it for the first time.
Right, but I'm saying,
So I'm saying, this is the first meeting ever.
I know, but I'm trying to set the stage for the other meetings.
Yeah.
Okay? We've already had meetings, we had a whole catastrophe and configuration over at the land use board where people were not doing what they should have been doing and recusing themselves. So, you know, let's
Why don't we do this? Yeah, why don't we do this?
If you want to have positive results, okay, if you want to achieve, okay, what you want to achieve, then you need to go about it a different way. Okay?
Let me
I mean, that's, thank you. No, I'm making the accusation.
The meeting was properly noticed at the September 17th. It was in the Asbury Park Press, is that correct? Okay, great. This was also put on the borough website. It was put out on all of the borough's social media, so it was properly noticed. To say it's illegal or not done is complete fabrication.
I'm not saying that's.
So what you're speaking outside of the discussion of the parameters of this meeting. No, it's not. This meeting is about a discussion of use, height, bulk standards, building design, site design, parking and circulation, focus areas of properties, open space, and other amenities. We're talking about zoning. And I'm asking for input. We are asking for input on these areas because it's what you want to see on Bay Avenue. So if you could please give us your name and address for the record.
Hello, Nancy Burton, 22 Atlantic Street. I just wanted to mention I don't see tattoo parlors under uses. I think that's what we're talking about.
Do you want tattoo parlors on Bay Avenue?
Sure.
It's not current, right, it's not currently, but
They're in all the waterfront
Consideration,
communities,
right?
small walking districts.
Yep.
I think a tattoo,
sure.
Is there any other use that you can think of that you?
Yeah, what do we mention?
I was questioning like a bait and tackle shop, but I see fishing there, so I just didn't see tattoo parlor.
Great.
I have a
This
question.
is the type of input that we're
Yes.
talking about.
I have a
Things that are not currently within uses.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a
Well, let's
question
look-
for Paul as well. Oh, wait.
Did you want to have some? Yeah, I do. Just your name and address.
Bert Stockman, property owner at 157 Bay Avenue. I own the property in my LLC's name, and I operate a commercial, business out of it, a retail business. So for people that are saying that retail is dead and yada yada, and nobody's coming into town, I beg to differ. I'm actually drawing people in. I actually happen to be a destination retailer. So this is what I'm doing. People are coming, people are looking for products and saying, oh, I can get this in Brooklyn, or, oh, look, I can get it in Highland. I've had people from Red Bank, from Long Branch, from all the way down in Ocean County, from all over. I've had people from across the country and everything. So, so what I'm looking for is, I want to see more retail on the first floor, and it's definitely a walkable area. I get a lot of people in walking around and stuff who, oh, I've walked by and I just wanted to pop in and see what's about. So I want to bring more people into town. I'm going to have more events in the shop that will bring more people in, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm also looking to develop the shop, so
Businesses that are outside of that specialty, or any other sort of specialty or niche, niches that are out there, like a tattoo parlor, it's not.
they kind of all fall under retail, to my thinking.
Okay.
I mean, it's all retail. It's all retail and services.
Retail and service. I just
Got
want
it.
to see more retail and services. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hi, Michelle Pizzullo, Highland Avenue. I have just a couple of questions. If the business changes, like the zoning, like say that you said it may change to more residential or more big, like you don't know, and maybe you don't know the answer. But if there is a business within what becomes a residential zone, does that business then lose their business? Do they have to move?
No.
Or they're grandfathered in?
So if they're grandfathered in,
Okay.
no one's gonna have to close a business, no one's gonna have to build something they don't wanna build.
Okay.
What we're gonna debate though is, what we should talk about over here is, whether this becomes superseding or overlay, two different phrases. Right now, it could be an overlay, which means that it'll either preserve all of the underlying zoning and overlay new zoning, and you can go proceed under either, or it'll supersede, meaning this will be the new zoning, in either case, everything's grandfathered in. But if we did a superseding, for example, when we changed the block from retail on the first floor, and we said, no, it has to be residential now. When that building was knocked down, someone came back, they would now have to be residential, under the retail plan. That's gonna be a pretty important discussion about us, if you wanna drive retail to residential, we obviously have to affect current property owners, but we can, in fact, the future, by now having this be superseding, not overlay, so you can never come back and do a retail project on it, so without getting permission to a plan.
But wouldn't that hurt the homeowners or the businesses' investment and sales?
As long as they're they're fine, as long as they want to operate business. Or sell their business,
Yeah, but if they sell their business,
it can still operate.
they could.
Yes,
sell it.
it's just if you were, you knock down the building and build something
The
else.
only thing they can is if the building gets knocked down, then that has to be built.
Or if they choose to
Specifications of that.
choose to knock down, build something else, then you have to build.
Just as it is right now. If there's a pre-existing single-family home that somebody sells to somebody else, and that person knocks it down and puts up a business, they don't have to get any special zoning done because that's already permitted in the zone.
Right, but what happens if it's a business that's in a residential zone?
It's not a residential zone as it is. Right now, it is a mixed-use zone. But it could change, but we're completely talking in hypotheticals right now. Because pre-existing, if there's a house there,
No, like on the backside of Shore Drive, right?
No, what I'm saying is if there's a current business and it was already deemed as like a mixed use or whatever, right? And then that zone gets changed to being a residential only. That business is already there. You're saying it's grandfathered in, and so if the building gets knocked down, the people that are selling their business, they're not really selling their property of the business, because now it's gonna be a residential.
no, if the business sells, somebody has a business and they're selling that business to somebody else to run as a different business, that remains.
Yes, that remains, but I'm saying if you change the zoning to being all residential in a certain area, that used to be either a mixed use or, and it has a business there. I mean, maybe I'm not explaining it.
Well,
I understand what you're saying.
Okay,
You do understand
Thank
what
you.
I'm saying.
one person at a time. And the
Maybe,
person that's gonna answer it the best is gonna be the planner or the attorney.
if I'm hearing it right, the question is, again, if you're trying to, no one's gonna force the building to be taken down or the business to close, so it'd be by choice. So the idea would be, well, hopefully, I don't like to assume things here, but if we're saying it's a residential area, there's a sense that there'd be, if the property owner thinks there's value in doing that, they'll make a return, a very good return, by selling to someone who could, or either building themselves or having someone build the residential there. If they don't think that makes sense, and they think the business makes more sense, then there'd be no incentive to, close the business or otherwise change the use. Again, maybe it's still not answering the question, but,
Maybe I can try. If there's a portion of the central business district that we deem residential only,
Mhm.
in that area, if there is an existing business, once we deem it residential only, and that business owner decides to sell that business to someone else for a different purpose, a different business purpose, will they be allowed to do that? Or when they sell the building, does it have to then become residential?
Yes, there we go.
okay, we're getting into detail.
The issue will come up when it comes to the land use board to get approval to build a new building there, in which case they would have to come up with new zoning. Until that happens, they can perpetuate the existing use.
So just to not get stuck on here, we're gonna put on uses, potentially residential as a permitted use. Okay, so I don't wanna get bogged down in one hypothetical after another hypothetical.
Very good.
We have no interest in upsetting existing uses or businesses at all.
Right, that's why we're trying to find this out.
I have a question.
Okay.
Well, I think people might be interested.
Sure.
Might it be beneficial for us to do some type of a study or some type of research in reference to what types of businesses would be or could be successful in this geographic location?
Well, there's a couple ways to look at it. One is, yes, an economic study would benefit. I don't know for a redevelopment plan necessarily if it would, because if we're already allowed for retail anyway, there's a pretty broad basket of uses that's permitted, so it's not as simple as saying we're going to attract, fine tune on what exactly you're looking to attract. I mean, it's not that there's no value in an economic study,
Right,
but in
but
the redevelopment plan, I'm not sure it's necessarily the
I asked that for the purposes of potentially allowing retail or something of that nature, and then having empty storefronts.
Fair enough. That's again why we're talking about maybe residential areas make sense. I mean, one complimentary, just real quick before we go back to the public, is overnight accommodations, hotels. Is that something that you think is complimentary that you want to try to encourage? Again, not this.
It's part of our conditional uses right
Already
now.
there now, so whether it's making it more, more lenient there, maybe giving more height or something to allow for that. There's other incentives, reducing the parking requirements for that, because that's oftentimes will be something that will help, bring people to a destination. There's certainly, a lot of attractions around here, and you also have the hotel tax, which would be good for your bottom line to have more overnight accommodations.
Yeah, just as a little historical aside, back when the train came through here, we had a lot more retail, we had a lot more businesses in town. Once that train went away, once the Navy, Army barracks went away, both up at Fort Hancock and up on the hill, it really depressed our economy. And because of a lot of the bulk parking standards that we had on Bay Avenue, it was just not feasible in order to have a business with us. I think one of the requirements was for every 300 square feet, you needed one parking space, and for these tiny parcels, you couldn't have off-street parking. So then what happens is people would apply to the land use board, and that's when the single-family homes started popping up on Bay Avenue. That's just a little aside to a look back of 50, 60 years ago. So that's why a lot of these things happen, and they continue to happen. And that's when we started playing with a lot of our parking ordinances, and we were looking at using this as an overlay to help get some of that back. As Dirk said, a lot of people said retail is dead. As a retailer, I can tell you it's not dead at all. It's doing quite well. It just depends on the type of retail that you want, and that's why we wanted to look and see what we have that's existing, that people aren't taking a bite at the apple, see if there is a service that's not, or some sort of use that we don't have currently. But if we put that on the list of things that are acceptable, maybe we'll get more traction to get more people in. Maybe if we look at parking and see if somebody has a larger tract of parcel of land, that they would build a parking deck, or they would do something funky with it, like they do in other states, where it's not just a parking deck, it's a parking deck and it has like little shops on all of the four corners of each level. Just a little, again, outside of the box thinking, and that's what this visioning is about right here.
Absolutely. Keep going.
We put in hair salons or pet things, nail salons, pet, is it personal care? It said health and fitness and spas, but it didn't, okay, so, it's not healthy, it's not good, it's just fun.
Right.
Okay. What about animals and pets and things like that? That's pretty much in there. Even the vet is, you could look at the, medical and healthcare offices. Well, it's your pet's medical or healthcare. And they already exist. Hair, nail, salons, spas, all of those. It is in there. Yes.
Let's say, for example, that,
For the record, it's Mr. Solop again, 205 Bay Ave.
let's say, for example, that I'm a redeveloper and I'm developing the property because I'm allowed to go up 4 or 5 stories, because that becomes the new zoning. I know a lot of friends that have been forced into these redevelopment areas, and they just really don't care about having anybody occupy the bottom spaces because now they have incomes coming from rental spaces. So is there a measure to stop that from happening? I know that's an ethical question because it's entirely on what the market's going to bear, what kind of businesses are going to be drawn in here, but, how long do they stay empty? And then we run into the same conundrum that we have right now, where the buildings, the owners of these properties have not developed them, and they remain vacant.
Yeah, I think I'm not a planner, but my experience on the downtowns is you want the first floor to be activated. Whether it's a retail space that they can't fill, that's not really activated. But some developers might put their amenity space on the first floor, right? So you're not walking past a store you can walk into, but you're walking past glass windows with the gym, right? So, and all that stuff gets into the redevelopment agreement with the redeveloper. We're going to negotiate with them, but
Would there be a tax credit for people to draw them into the town?
we can consider that. Those are on the table.
Set up a business?
Those are on the table too. We can offer tax savings,
Like a 2 or 3 year abatement or whatever?
there's short-term business. Yeah, all those things are going to be on the table. I actually might suggest, you already have, the uses are probably, they seem like they might be the most important, but they're probably the least because retail is pretty much covered in your current ordinance. I think you said it's a hotel, we're definitely not gonna let industrial uses, right? So there's probably not many uses we would come up with that, but we should really get into some of the needs, like, for example, to your question, what's gonna drive redevelopment? How much height are we willing to tolerate? More height, more residential, more wallets on the street drives development. But I know height is a challenging issue for people, so height is probably a really good topic for us, because again, we don't want a big building, but if you want to make a downtown succeed, you need wallets. And the best way to have wallets is to have people living in the downtown. The best way to have people living in downtown is having them in multifamily, rental, or condo projects, and they're going to be the ones that are going to walk into the downtown because they're already there. So that requires height, particularly in downtown that has limited parking, right? So if, for example, we're going to allow someone to, if they're going to need to park, these residents who don't want parking, they want to park underneath to maximize the number of units, so that's a podium. On top of the podium, that's already one story, it's for the parking, right? So now you're going residential, but you won't build a podium for one floor residential.
And with FEMA requirements, you cannot have residential on the ground floor. It could only be a commercial business on the ground floor or parking. Hang on,
I've heard
Tina.
3 stories is all I've ever wanted. Could we, in certain cases, would 4 make sense?
The success of, like, say, Broadway or Woodbridge came from building those, residential spaces on top of the buildings.
Tina Kemmer, 164 Linden Avenue. You were talking about smaller businesses, so my question is the church that's on Bay Avenue. That's one of my questions, is what's going to happen with that? Because that's a pretty large space. And thank you, and I know that that's been vacant for a while. And also, my other concern is the flooding and the resiliency factor with regard to drawing in any kind of business. What will make it attractive for new businesses to want to come to our town with the intensity of the storms that we've been getting and the amount of flooding and the amount of damage that has been done continuously, very recently over the years. So to me, that to me is a major problem, is what makes it, how is our town going to be somewhat on the cutting edge of, like, we've got this crisis with these, storms. How are we going to address that to make it attractive for businesses that are going to be on the ground floor if, as we're saying, residents aren't allowed to be on the ground floor? So.
Okay, well, the first question is about the particular property, about church. Right now, the plan has nothing to do with what will happen there. So if the uses are, changed to allow for future development, obviously, the owner of the property can do as it sees fit. But that's not something, again, I don't think it's intending. It's in the redevelopment area, yeah, so it's,
So how so the way the redevelopment is gonna have to work is, because we're not using condemnation, as you're describing, we're not fixing the property, right? So all we can do is incentivize them to develop. How do we incentivize people to develop? We changed the zoning, so that church is probably zoned.
it's in the CBD zone, actually.
It's in the CBD zone, which may only have 36 feet, right?
36 feet.
So they may do the math and say, I can't sell that property and have it developed, because I can only do 36 feet, it can't work for cars, it's a podium in 1 story. If we said to that property owner, we change the zoning, we're gonna let you do 3 stories, for example, and then we're gonna maybe reduce somewhat the parking. Now we've incentivized that property owner to say, oh, wow, that property's, it makes sense, I'll go find someone to sell it to build the project. They're not gonna do it, they're church, I guess. So that's really, we're trying to drive development through improved zoning at some level, because we're not taking people's property, we just need to incentivize them by changing their zoning, and that comes with things like giving them a little more density on residential, which drives zoning, giving them a little more height so that they can park, maybe relaxing some of the height, the parking requirements, so that they don't have to pay for it, but parking is expensive to provide, you need the land, they gotta build a podium, which is expensive. So this is the effort we're trying to drive, and there's bigger parcels like that. Property owners may come to us and say, we think we can do this, but we need this kind of help.
And the flooding and resilience?
Yes, and on that, I believe this is sort of outside the development area.
Yes and no, but I did have a thought on that one, is that, many places have to deal with this issue. So my office in Hoboken, for example, we have a big issue with flooding there. They have a new Southwest Resiliency Park, it's called. It's basically an area within a redevelopment area that's devoted to, the stormwater recharge, and so you're simply setting aside some space as part, through the redevelopment process, the Southwest redevelopment area, they did that. So that could be something that in this plan, to say, maybe not every block is going to be commercial or mixed use, there might be areas that are set aside for something else. Now, of course, you can't condemn the property to do that, so it's a matter of how you work as a public-private partnership to say, well, if you consolidate a bunch of properties, here's the trade-off, and you'll get, again, maybe more height, in that instance, more height or reduced parking, whatever it is, to say, dedicate something that's for the public good on a portion of the property.
Well, I think that needs to be built in.
Absolutely.
I think that needs
Okay.
to be essentially built into anything that we come up with. And I also think that, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to take up a lot of
No?
people's,
Why are you looking
But I
right
think we need to, also enact, thank you, the form-based zoning, I'm all for that. Because I just have to look at Atlantic Highlands and, at Long Branch and see some of these monstrosities that have been allowed to completely not be in kind with the other historic buildings here. So it would be a real pity if we allowed some big, cinder block behemoth, to be built. So I'm in favor for those things, for flooding and resiliency, somehow compensating for that, and for enacting form-based zoning.
So let me take that as advocate, if you will, on form-based zoning. First, I've been doing it for 30 years. And the problem with form-based zoning, is the development community struggles to understand what you want. Because form-based zoning often doesn't have your setback is this and various things. We can achieve much of what's form-based zoning in our redevelopment agreement or in our redevelopment plan where we have significant design standards. We can tell you what kind of exteriors, we can tell you what we want it to be shore-like, there's different ways to describe it, but not be form-based zoning. So I don't even know if you're a fan of form-based zoning.
No, I'm not a big fan, actually. Well, for the same reasons that, well, we could,
So, but I think what you're saying.
What you're talking about really, Tina, is more about the building design and materials.
Right.
And that's the type of thing that you're really speaking to, and we're gonna tackle that next, but
Yes.
this young lady's got a little something to say.
Yeah, I just
Can
wanted
you
to.
just give me your name and address for that?
Maria, 84 Neversaint Avenue. I'm on a hill on the road, but I do have a question. I have a geographic question. I missed that on the picture that you show. Is our junkyard included in the reformation or not?
Yes.
Okay, and all the places where the
DPW, yes, all of the municipal property is in there as well.
Okay, because you guys moving, right?
Yes.
On top, okay. And the second question is the scope of attraction, because I live right on the highway, and I know there's like a long line of the tourists that are trying to get on Sandy Hook, and Sandy Hook closed because their parking space is taken, right? So if those places are gone, the parking can be built right there. I mean, I don't know if the town will be overwhelmed with the people, but if there is a parking, and they will go to the Sandy Hook with a shuttle, and then they come back to the restaurants, to the retail, to do the shopping. But I don't know if it's too much, because it could be too much. And we can also use the C Street parking, because on the days where the tourists coming,
We would have to negotiate that with the property owner.
yeah, but we can talk to them to do the shuttle also. Like, if the bus shuttle from the town is bring people to the town, if the boat goes to the Sandy Hook from the town, not from the Manhattan only, but from the town, that will bring people there, but there is no business district, there's just residential. That could be not working. But with all those buildings gone, I don't know, junkyards may be important, probably is, but it could become smaller, because it's a huge space it's taking. I know there's people coming there, sometimes it's not enough when they pick up the, let's say, paper or bottles, you have to drive them in. And now they're keeping records, how many people coming, to see how badly we need it, I guess.
It's also, I mean, this is completely off topic, but they're keeping the records so that they know if more people come at one time or another, that the yard is open, so it's most,
Sorry.
it's better for when they know that more public want it at this time rather than that time.
I don't know whether it's
Rearrange
needed or
that.
not, yeah, I just feel like if it's needed, maybe it can become smaller,
Sure.
because it's right there, right behind the main businesses, and then mentioning the train, we were not there when the train was there, but, like, hearing from you saying that people were coming, that more businesses were there, I think it's a huge opportunity to have that redirect all those cars right there down the hill. And then
We're talking about parking and about some sort of amusement or attraction.
So back to uses, that's fine, that's no problem.
Hang on one second.
Yeah, typically you don't allow parking as a principal use or main use, but in some instances, like the mayor said with the garage, or here, if you have an attraction, that could be something to be considered,
if
yeah.
all those people coming.
I wouldn't want every
Habitat resource.
Yeah.
Barbara Jovings, 247 Bay Ave. I'd like to talk about height.
Yes, thank you, okay.
Currently, I see that there was usually two, for the residential, I guess, for the most part. There was two-story house with an attic, and it gets elevated. Now, what is that considered? Because I think that's as high as we should go.
So the 2.5, so,
Above EFE.
So you've got
you're right.
Not counted towards the ground.
right, so,
Homes on the hills that are outside the flood zone, you count it from grade. If you're in the flood zone, you count it from the top of EFE.
okay, so the top of the block kind of thing, is that it?
Based on.
Okay, so the 13 feet is the VFE, right? So you've got 2.5 stories above the flood where you have to elevate your house to. And that's what we are now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 2 stories in an attic, or 3 stories, is it considered 3 stories? And then what happens if you want to put a deck on the top of that 3rd story? Are we now 4 stories? I know, when does it stop? So right now, we're 2.5. I'd like it to stop where it is, because it's big enough,
You know,
yeah. Because once you put that house, or that building goes up and you've got 2 stories above it with an attic, that's it. That's high.
The only thing I would ask you to think about is that's not working now.
It's not working now, where?
We're not getting any developers that are coming in and
No.
redeveloping their company.
What buildings are like that?
I'm saying that, we may want to consider giving a little more height.
There's nobody like that downtown. Those buildings are all 2.5, I don't know anybody. who's-
No, because they're not permitted to now.
But if they elevate them, right?
I think what he's saying is that the people that own the land are not developing, they're not developing because of most of it.
Well, the restriction is, well,
And I don't, what I'm saying is the hard part, right? The restrictions are there today, they're too restrictive, people are not developing as a result. If we want to,
I beg to differ,
Maybe that's-
sorry. I think they're not coming because they're not coming, and I don't know that if it was any higher, it would make a difference. Also, you're saying that you want to have residential above. How many stories are these people going to be walking up to get to their 3rd floor apartment? They're really not going to put an elevator in.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the comment. I guess the other,
You know, right now, and also some of these residential houses, if you keep a residential area, we get swarmed in. Things are all big and tall around you, and then there goes your sun, there goes everything. And we gotta think about the historical look and the charm of the town.
well, that's fair, it's a fair point. Ties into one of the other things that has further down the list, I'll get back to it later, but, essentially focus areas, there might be places where you say, okay, I get, for 5 or 6 or 8 blocks, you don't want it taller, but maybe across from a park, or at the end of the corridor. There might be places where you say, maybe a little more height would make sense there, just not all the way across.
Town that has height and higher than that.
No, we're looking forward to what, we're looking to transform the area, eventually.
Oh, okay. There's any place there now, what buildings do we have associated?
We can give it, we can bring examples, I'm sure people see it, yeah, so. Okay, thank you.
Barbara?
But not within the set business, certainly.
Correct. Barbara, you good?
John Golf, 199 Linden. I was interested, I really like the idea of the height thing, like being, 38 feet sounds like 3 stories. I feel like it should be like more like how could you, that's only like 2 floors. Like, that's what I'm saying, no one's gonna come in here and build a multi-family home with 2 stories above the flood zone. It doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't see why that's been like that, but I know that you have a disagreement with that, but I just feel like, I don't think anyone, yeah, exactly, it's not working. Like, the town is not doing anything. What if we had like 5 stories above the flood zone? I was thinking, yeah. Just like Atlantic Highlands and things like that.
Okay, well, again, there's something that, to think about, again, maybe not across the entire area, but there might be a few,
Because
whether it's a
how-
larger
how-
property where you can accommodate it, or again, next to an open space, or it's a trade-off. Again, redevelopment oftentimes they'll say, if you get to build higher, you have to have more space for either public parking, or a public park, or resiliency park, or something along those lines. The trade-off to get that height, as opposed to saying you can build 6 stories, or 8 stories, or 10 stories.
Yeah, does it start from the flood zone, like the 38 feet? You're saying like, if it's, Bay Avenue is like 11 AE, it's like 11 feet. So if it's like, if you would build your garage 8 feet, and then it starts from that point, 38 feet? Or 12 feet, if you elevate, right?
It starts at the top of the base floor.
So you have your garage 12 feet, and then that would only be 2 more floors you could make, right? That doesn't make sense. Yeah, I think they should be like 3 stories above that at least, like, I don't understand why you wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay, let's see if others, yeah, that's good.
But I understand like the other,
Thank you.
the sunlight thing, I think, but
There's also, remember, there's also ways to do step backs, right? You can do 2 stories with a step back on the 3rd story, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So there's architectural ways you can make height not feel like
And also, just to be clear about Atlantic Highlands, we are not Atlantic Highlands. Atlantic Highlands Main Street is twice the size of Bay Avenue, so they can have higher buildings and it doesn't have that shadow effect, because it's so much wider.
It's a Maureen Brooke, Highland Avenue. It seems to me, just intuitively, I think, or visually, that if you had your taller buildings closer to the hill, they wouldn't have the impact. And that's an area where, you got all the DPW stuff, you got the borough trailers and all that stuff in there. That would seem like a very likely place where you could do slightly higher, that would not impede the views from people on the hill right there, could see right over them, would not obstruct, and also could have something on the roof of interest that could view the water from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gert Softman, 157 Bay Avenue. The issue with height is, I'd like to see right now, because I want to redevelop my property. Right now, it's a single, level cinder block building. So I'm looking to go up. And in order to go up, and I don't want to go up super high, I want 3 levels. I want to be able to put a couple of units up there. The space, and I don't want to take over the entire property. I want to leave a lot of open space of the property and go up with 3 stories. So I have a retail space on the 1st floor and 2 or 3 apartments on the next 3 floors. So that's not an excessive use of height. Where I am on Bay Avenue is mostly all commercial properties. There's no homes mixed in. So in spaces like that, I could see even going up to 4 feet. It would not, or 4 stories, it would not affect anybody that way. And not for nothing, even if we go up 4 stories, I'm sorry if somebody behind me can't see anymore. That's the way development happens.
What about parking?
The parking is another thing. I don't drive. I don't have a car. There's a lot of people, I'd like to see this area developed more, and really, we've had a lot of people come in from different areas that say, wow, this is great, I can park my car and not have to use it for weeks. That's what I'd like to see, and those are the kind of,
So then, to your point, we would need to change parking.
Yes.
So,
Get to that too then.
I'll make another sheet, I promised you. Go ahead.
Hi, Lorna Milbauer on Marina Bay Court. So, I think many of us, when we moved to, I'm a recent, came here about 3 years ago, and the first introduction to Highlands was coming down Linden Avenue onto Waterwich, and I was just charmed by In the Garden and the cafe and the flowers and even the bikes that,
And I just, oh my God, it was so charming. And then, yes, I didn't really care for a lot of the, what looked like rundown and empty spots, but I just saw the waterfront and the beaches, and I thought I could walk to such lovely restaurants, and I think many of us were attracted to the town for all these things, and we could, the accessibility to the beaches and everything else. And so, if we can all agree on a vision, and it's not always that commercial vision where people capitalize and make tons of money, but it's a vision. My vision is we're a seaside village, a charming, funky, artsy seaside village, that we become this community where, and we already have to some degree, where we appreciate the music and we appreciate the arts. And my husband and I, when we lived in northern Jersey, we used to say, okay, where can we go this weekend? And we'd say, okay, let's go, I don't know if you're familiar, Piermont, New York is on the water. And they have eateries and galleries and boutiques and little shops. And we would choose to go there, or Nyack, or New Hope, or, we could be a tiny, mini Cape May. I mean, we could be a destination, a beautiful, lovely destination that doesn't look commercial, like Long Branch. I can't wait to come home when I go down to that Pier Village area. It's like, oh my God, I breathe a sigh of relief when I come into Highlands, even though aesthetically for me, it needs to be more beautiful than it is. So I see galleries and boutiques and antique shops and unique shops like Gertz, and yes, maybe we need some B&Bs and eateries, and I love the idea of your shuttle when people come in and they can, there could be a little shuttle. But this town, and then we have the lighthouse, the Twin Lights is such a historic, we have history here, we have Sandy Hook, we're just not taking advantage of everything that we have. It's so rich, and it could look so quaint and so beautiful. And when I hear people talking about anything, I know it's not realistic to be above 3 stories, but I really start to not breathe when I hear about 4 or 5 stories and what you're talking about. Even these parking things, that's getting me nervous too. Yes, exactly. So the bottom line is we're talking quaint, charming, funky, artsy destination, and just thriving in that way. And I so think it can happen.
Thank you.
Just briefly, I'm Melanie Hemingheim, and I live up on Linden, and I'm going to be really sorry that I say this, but I wanted to ask, you were talking about on one side maybe of the street having a little bit higher so you can see out over the other side, and can people have businesses on top of can you have eating on top of a building? Is that something that is possible? Is that?
Right now, in the commercial business district, you can have 3 stories, business on the ground floor, and 2 more stories, and that could be either residential or commercial.
Right.
To make a roof deck.
I'm just saying, if you make one side higher and the next side, and the other side lower, then the side next to the more residential is actually lower, and the other side, if you're up there, you can actually see out, you can end up it just is, I'm envisioning, I'm gonna be sorry, because if you're on the roof, I'm gonna hear it up right above it. I just thought,
Thank you.
I believe Melanie, right? Nancy Burton, 22 Atlantic Street, and I also own In the Garden LLC, 69 Wood Oak Avenue. But, I was gonna ask, what's the permitted height right now? So I believe Melanie just mentioned retail on the first floor, 2 stories above.
38 and a half.
If you have the
So
parking underneath, 38.
I think that's very nice right now, and possibly in areas where it's feasible to go a little higher, because what I see are lots of vacant lots, and I also see abandoned buildings, so I also know what makes sense when you want to run a business, and they're going to need to come in and build here, be able to
build enough units upstairs and with the retail downstairs. So currently, I like where we're at. If there's a way to go a little higher in certain areas, not necessarily sandwiched between residential homes, that sounds like a good plan. And rooftop eating is great too. Rooftop garden, wonderful.
I just want to, while we're waiting for the next person to comment, quickly on height, two things, one on height, one on parking. Height, just maybe assuage concerns. If we consider allowing an additional story or two, at some point, you have to go above, I think it's 4 stories where it's above stick construction, like steel. There's a break point where essentially you can't go from like 4 to 5 or 6 stories. It's got to go to 10 or 12 or much higher. We're not looking, I don't believe, anyone's advocating for high rise, so it's going to be almost a natural limitation of, even if you're saying in certain areas it's 3 or 4 additional stories, where you couldn't possibly get there. So, again, not that we're saying we're definitely going to do that. That's one thing. The other thing is on parking, just as we're thinking about this issue really quick, is from a planning point of view, there are communities who are, and planners out there who have the idea of trying to take back the street, first of all, and secondly, to account for the cost of free parking. You look at Bay Avenue, that's all publicly owned land that is used to put cars in. We're not getting any revenue as far as meters. It's not usable for people walking or biking generally. Again, it's going to be, for retailers might not like the idea, but this is something to think about. It's a delicate balance between, you don't want to overpark, because you know, there's space that can be used for other things, but you also do need to have something there. So again, that's as we talk about parking ratios. I know the borough's been thinking about making it less restrictive, maybe allowing for a payment in lieu of parking spaces, right, into a fund. So there's different ways you can deal with this, but something to...
We just updated our parking ordinance for that, more efficient. There used to be a nominal fee, and it was only paid once. And that's it. You never have to pay your efficiency of off-street parking. And this year, we changed that ordinance to amend it so that it's now a yearly fee. And that is every single year, it goes into that parking fund. The only thing that is used in that parking fund is to rehab our parking lots. So it's a dedicated fund to be used for parking and parking lots throughout the borough.
Great. And the thought there would be, again, for well-run public parking, out of the public parking, then the individual property owners don't need to provide for that necessarily. In fact, there's often apartments in more urban settings where they either have little parking or no parking or charge extra for it, because that's otherwise a hidden cost for a renter or a buyer. To say, you don't want a parking space, well, too bad, the building cost X dollars more because we had to build these, 2 spaces per unit. So again, I'm not giving you the solution here, I'm not telling you what I think is the answer, but these are things to think about. That's not as simple as saying we want to make sure we require lots of parking because of, for one purpose, and that's at cost purposes of making it more charming and walkable and making it, more of a vibrant place.
Hi, Tricia Rivera, Waterwich Avenue. It's my understanding that the bulk requirements right now, it's my understanding that the bulk requirements right now for Bay Avenue is 0, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong?
As far as setbacks from the street?
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, right, it's to allow for...
Right.
For commercial, okay.
So, we live in a floodplain, and I find that a little unnerving that we'd be taking away more permeable land that we desperately need in this town. So I'd like those bulk requirements to be looked at and to be considered, to leave space for more permeable land, since we do live in a floodplain. That's one thing. I'd love to see green roofs.
Oh, there you go. So just real quick on that, just to clarify the one topic though about the coverage, there is a coverage, I'm going to gloss over it. You do have a maximum building coverage of 35%, so that's the area in the lot that is taken up by the actual building. So it's not, even though it's 0-foot setback, you can't just build the entire lot. And likewise, there's a lot coverage requirement of 80% for impervious for pavement and sidewalks and everything. So there are some limits now. Maybe you can make them more restrictive.
I would,
well, yes, it's not just the setback is the point, I guess, yes. But that's a fair point.
Or using materials around that absorb water.
Yes. But the green, yes, I didn't include that, but the green roofs, that's a great idea. That's awesome. Because redevelopment plans could be more strict about things such as green roofs and sustainability measures.
And in addition, open space, I would like to see open space used for dual uses such as parks and rain gardens, detention basins, things like that. And then my last question is regarding, the redevelopers. Since the redeveloper success depends on the use of our infrastructure, I'd like to see some givebacks in that regard. Since we are giving them tax rebates and in lieu of taxes, I think they should also give back as far as infrastructure.
So we're a long way from giving any tax breaks, but I hear what you're saying.
Okay, I mean, I'd like to see that in the redevelopment plan. You know, if they're gonna build a large 4-story building with a lot more bathrooms.
We're gonna
And,
community benefits, and I really agree.
Okay, thank you, that was it.
And those are just all of the current permitted uses for Bay Avenue.
Okay.
Barbara, then Michelle.
Barbara Billings, 247 Bay. For parking, the town is kind of like a walking place. Everybody likes to walk around on Bay Avenue all the time, especially on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you see people walking all the time. Is there a way for us to do something with the parking where they park in a certain place, like maybe the DW yard or maybe Seastick or whatever, we get someplace for people to park, and then work out some kind of a little get-me thing or something to get people to Bay Avenue from, you know, so that they could walk, or park your car there and then we'll bring you over here. Maybe just on the weekends, or maybe when there's a lot of, in the summer, of course in the winter, but I would think that, you know, there's a lot of walking going on and we should kind of, you know, take advantage of that. This is a nice walking town, and then that's when people will stop at the shops and stuff.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, oh, those electric bikes, yeah.
One more thing?
Yeah. Hi again, Tricia Rivera, 31 Woodward. I know there's a redevelopment plan going up at Shuttle Lawn, and there's going to be a lot of trees probably removed. I'd love to see some of those trees saved for perhaps some open spaces down here.
For a different meeting than this one.
Okay, I'm just talking, right, I'm talking about saving trees and bringing them down to Bay Avenue. to have.
Or requiring trees with new development eventually, for example, street trees, if that's a thing.
I mean, there are really old trees up there that's going to probably be, the forest, and it's really sad. So I'd like to see them go to use.
Great, thank you. Again, the redevelopment plans, we talked about before, the design standards can be very specific, requiring trees or landscaping, streetscaping, benches, materials, all those types of things, so, definitely.
Claudia Dorigo, 12 Cedar. I have a question to address the parking. You realize that Bay Avenue is a county road, and I know we've had issues with driveways on Bay Avenue, so how are you addressing dealing with the county? Because you're talking about parking, and anybody that's going to build on Bay Avenue really doesn't have the right to the parking in front of their business.
Correct.
So how is that addressed? I mean, the county could tie you up for years now.
We're talking about off-street parking.
Right, we're talking about the parking lot, because people are talking about parking in front of buildings or putting apartments above. Where are you going to park those people? You're going to tell them to park in a parking garage down the street? You're putting a building in the middle of Bay Avenue, and you have 4 apartments above it?
Right.
You have to have, what, 2 spaces?
It depends on how many bedrooms there are.
Or even 1 space. If you have 3 stories, and you're on Bay Avenue, and you have parking underneath, and you have a retail or something, you're not gonna fit 4 or 6 cars underneath that building. So what are you going to do with the Bay Avenue parking? I'm missing
I
that.
mean, you might put cars in the building, if you build a podium.
Right,
Then-
okay.
And so you have retail in front and you have a podium, so there'll be parking underneath. That could accommodate some of it. Central parking's an option. I think we're just kicking around here whether we need to do some sort of parking study. We have unregulated parking, which generally results in not necessarily regular parking in the street. For
I just
example,
know from the Vigo after Sandy, it was a major issue with people trying to live on Bay Avenue and the parking issue.
Sure.
And the driveway.
Yep, absolutely.
So, on the driveway issue, you know, in some towns, well, I'm doing work in Highland Park. We have an ordinance is trying to limit the number of driveways onto Route Avenue in that case. Because it's more dangerous, like the more driveway you got to transverse to get down to the front of businesses, the way more dangerous.
Okay, so how much weight does the town have, does the county to limit?
Curb cuts, we can limit curb cuts.
The county have to approve, but
Not the town.
People do it.
my experience is municipalities usually can work with a county when they have if they have a plan of their own. I hope we're not at cross purposes with them as far as, you know, if you're trying to encourage more walkable area, revitalizing a town. I can't imagine the counties, you know, maybe I'm speaking out of line here, but the county shouldn't be getting in the way of that if it's done through the proper municipal process. But again, that's why I threw that information out about parking. It's not a settled debate, but it's something that is being considered a lot differently these days as far as the trade-offs. As you don't want to just require all the parking and then overwhelm development just essentially to put cars there all the time. And if you have parking lots that can be utilized by multiple businesses and or residents, you know, that's what I think the borough is going for as well with this payment in lieu of parking program to pay for those facilities.
In order, you know, to encourage walkability, it's things like limiting curb cuts, support people are so dangerous walking, but it's things like limiting dead spaces that you have to walk past where there's really no detail, nothing for a block. This discourages people to walk. It's lower parking ratios for people that will rent these apartments. The developer has to put one space per spot. For people that are going to rent, they're only going to have one space. Even if it's 2 bedrooms, people who only rent it don't have one car. Like, so there's a bunch of things we can do to discourage cars in the district, encourage walkability. And those are all things that we can take into the plan. Just those things I just described.
Hi, Carla Stefano, 62 Gravelly Point Road. I just want to be mindful of underground utilities in all the new development projects. Mandatory.
Thank you.
Again, Mr. Stevens?
You know, I want to talk about facades. Who? Oh, 205 Bay Avenue, Highlands. Facades, awnings, awning shades, awning colors, building schemes, building colors, you know, bloody, ugly sidewalks that we have, you know, I mean, there's so many different, you know, beachy presses that are available with starfish and shells and everything else, you know, just a couple of things.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that's one of the topics we're going to get to. We're on that just now, building design, so. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, that is one of the things we should be really focused on once you get to the nuts and bolts of the plan, because again, traditional zoning, you can't say it has to be, you know, either brick or stone or shingle buildings. It's just whatever. You really can't get into that. In redevelopment, we can, and we can say that the 30% of the facade has to be glass. The storefronts have to be, you know, 70% glass. Those types of things. You can get into that level of detail.
I mean, are there particular buildings in town that you like the architectural style that we should be aware of, for example? Is there a building in town you say, oh wow, that sort of evidences the kind of architecture we want? So that, give us that.
Unfortunately, we can't just yell out the home, unfortunately, for the record. So if you want to, in your time to speak, you know, properly just tell us.
Well, I mean, look, I love what you did at the Feed and Seed. I love in the garden. Oh my God, I mean, to me, that makes me smile every time I come into town. And when you talk about height, when I come into town, I can see the water. And if that corner building needs renovated and it's going to be higher than the other buildings on Waterwich right there, it's going to impede the look, this quaint village look that we right have now. So when we talk of quaint village and we're seeing tall, cinder-like buildings, I think we don't have anything, I don't think we have anything particularly enticing architecturally, but we do have bungalow-looking houses, we have colonial-looking homes. I love it. Steve, your facade is absolutely wonderful, and John's, the Italian restaurant, did a spectacular job in Lickities and Porcini's and Fresh. I mean, we have lots of very charming, beautiful places that I think if we can that Gert's your place looks great. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm missing anybody, like the Academy Award here, but, and so,
It's okay, but I was gonna mention too, I just will say what the interesting thing about it is, you talk about Quaint Seaside Village, but a lot of the examples they gave are actually brick and masonry as well, so it's interesting, that's not your typical, like, your picture. Yeah, no, I'm not to say it's bad what you're saying, but that it's interesting, we shouldn't be going necessarily just for little seaside cottages, of shingle cottages, it could be other types of materials too.
The murals are fun, so I guess, again, it's from charming to a little bit funky, we can be eclectic, we are eclectic already, we can't, take away that. I'm a interior designer, so I have a sense of design and, so, I mean, the eclecticness is there, but I really worry about brand new stuff coming in and taking away, and that, the height can add to that, and the bulk can add to that.
Got it. And I will say just one thing on building materials, even though there's no plan, but I can guarantee cinder block buildings will not be allowed. That's not a material that we're, just to be clear though, I understand what you're saying, but not too slick, but yes, the good thing, even all this, we can say no, it's gotta be clad in something different, and you can limit those materials.
I think that can be, again, making it effective, it doesn't have to be matching, because that's not gonna happen.
Got it, great, thank you.
Maria Kovalev, Eric Singh, and I do have like a similar question to you guys in terms of redevelopment on your part. I noticed that like Long Branch, they don't have those ugly wires along the roads. Maybe you can start think about it to bury them.
Yes, so that's as well.
What you said, underground utilities, bury them underground.
Oh, I thought you were talking about that. Oh, that's already underground. Oh,
No, to make them go underground.
wow, yeah, that's, sorry. But is that what you think?
That's completely, we can make it possible.
Because this is making that like so ugly, and then it's like falls, it wouldn't fall, they fall, they dangerous, and there's a power outrageous when there's a wind. So they'll be so awesome in terms of beauty of it.
Yes.
Especially the business
Melanie Hemingway, 83 Linden. I just wanted to say that I think that requiring certain, I don't know what the requirements would be, but to have a requirement on that first floor that acknowledges the flooding already, that you can sell to possible retailers, I think is really important, that you have requirement of, I don't know if it has to do with what, the level of if the floor has to be cement, or if you have to have something on wheels, or if you have to have the possibility of lifting things, or you have to have a stairway that makes it possible to take your refrigerator upstairs, I don't know what the,
There's things like floodgates, you have to install in the floodgates, which will fit the door.
Right, but that's a requirement that if you're building it, that there's a standard. That's it.
We got some, in order and out of order, but I think I've got them all down for you.
Design. I mean, site design, I think we kind of picked up with the resiliency and the.
And we do have a building design manual.
Yes.
That's on our borough website now. We need to get that, retyped.
So one thing I don't think we did talk about is maybe if anyone has a particular either properties or locations or focus areas that, again, there's 155 lots. So it's going to be hard to focus equally at all of them, but maybe there's, like we heard already, the entrance to the outside the corridor, but the entrance, the southern end, if you will. I always think, next to a park is always a good place where you have, again, as you come downhill, as we talked about, you have a focus area there that maybe is the first, emphasis of this plan. I'm just throwing my ideas out there. It's more important to hear yours, though.
Okay, here's my thing on the retail on the first floor, and one of the problems for any kind of development of retail on the first floor is, in order to have flood insurance, the building on the first floor for retail needs to be flood-proofed, flood waterproofed. None of the buildings on Bay Avenue are. Mine isn't, because it's extraordinarily expensive. It is out of this world expensive to flood-proof the first floor. which is why FEMA said everybody residential goes up one flight, because we're commercial, it doesn't matter, I'm not living there, my stuff will get flooded. I get notice, everything gets carted out. That's why my commercial building is right now built with, the cement board. All my interior, electric is outdoor wiring, so when the water comes in, it's not gonna get wrecked. So there's things I was able to do, but to bring in new construction or doing that type of thing, that's one of the blockades I see to some of the, somebody coming in and building, retail on the first floor and residential up above. I've got an empty lot next to me. I've got notice that it's sold. I'd love to see retail on the first floor and a few stories up above. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
And just to speak a little bit about that, when I purchased my commercial building, and I did flood-proof it, all the walls are concrete, the floor is a foot above what it used to be, so that even with our regular nuisance flooding, water does not get into our building. And sadly, we all saw what happened with the remnants of Ida, and with so many of New Jerseyans lost their lives during that because they were living in basement apartments and they could not get out of their homes and they perished. And that is why FEMA has that requirement. You cannot have residential on that ground floor. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add to this? Sure.
Basically about the redevelopers, okay, and their financial status. And, is there any way to make sure that when these redevelopers come in and they commit to redeveloping a property, that there's a timeline for them to finish and that they are financially able to finish so that we don't leave a mess? I mean, I'm sure we're all aware of the situation in town that's creating havoc. We've got a street closed and everything because of, and I'm not saying it's a financial thing, but there's a timeline involved if this is a situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the benefits of redevelopment is we're gonna have a redevelopment agreement, which is a contract. So on top of the zoning, there's a contract that binds the redeveloper. By law, they have to give us a commencement date, completion date. There's penalties, there's all provisions.
And also keeping the deep work area.
Right, and we also will vet the developers, for the borough, we'll make sure that they've done they'll show us things they've done in places. I mean, these are probably relatively small projects, and probably a lot of people didn't qualify, but, we'll definitely do some vetting of the redevelopment. Our only limitation is generally, again, because we're not taking people's property, at some level, we're subject to the property owner rights, right? We get to work with who we want to work with, she wants to work with, who she wants to work with. We'll have to work through that process, but there will be a contract.
To go on to the next steps here, there's currently a survey in the field that's going to be up until Halloween. Happy Halloween, everyone. We already have about, I checked it earlier today, about 420 full responses. So it's really good. It's going to have a lot of weight to it, to what we call a stable base in the industry. Once you get a couple of hundred responses, and you'll see, once you get the next couple of hundreds, your percentages really change that much because you have such a large amount of input. So again, everyone should have gotten a postcard mailed to their home or business. Next on the agenda will be on Wednesday. We are going to be authorizing the planner to do the plan. That's going to be one of the resolutions. And then Mr. Greigel is going to get all of this feedback that I wrote up. Also, just as an aside, my former company, I let them know I was doing these surveys for the borough, and they told me that they will provide tabulations for free. So that's awesome on them. I was very grateful. I will also give all of that data and report over to Mr. Greigel. And then he's going to be crunching a lot of data in order to do our next scheduled hearing, and that will be at the Land Use Board on December 2nd. the land use board is talking about having a specific date where they can memorialize after they vote on it. And that vote is for consistency with the master plan. And this is the same process that we did with the other two development areas, so we're just following the statutory process. And unless the council has a flavor of having a million special meetings and, or 2 extra special meetings, we will, let that go until January 1st and January 19th to have the introduction and the second reading and the adoption for the ordinance for the plan. So those are our next steps down the road. Yes?
I have 3 questions. Between now and December 2nd, is there more input? You guys are gonna go write something up and then send those to the land?
Well, there's the survey
Right.
that's
And
online.
So we don't get to know what you decide, it's just gonna go to the land use board and we're gonna vote?
No. There's a full-blown hearing at the land use board
Oh, okay.
on December 2nd.
Okay, so they're not voting on anything, they're just hearing it.
They're hearing it and deciding if what they're hearing is consistent with the master plan.
All right, so let me walk, so you guys also have that draft plan, time for the council to set, and be a meeting of the council, set a plan, the plan board. This is he's gonna do his best, so that's our plan. At this meeting, you will have seen the plan, you will already then send, planning board, running sport to 5, or else it'll be on timeline. You plan on the comment. Then when it comes back to the council, there'll be another public hearing. So there'll be at least 2 times, you'll have it long before that. There'll be plenty of time for people to walk through the plan and pick it apart. It'll probably evolve till we get to the point where the council. So we're not, we're going to introduce it to this thing, so, until January 1, maybe we'll have time.
Thank you. I hate to backtrack, I just wanted to say one thing before I say something about this. These large lots that there will be possible development on, I'd like to see, them covered, blue walls, in other words. Like, I work in the city, so when I go down, right. And I would like to see, I would love to see, not sidewalks, just the blue walls, that.
Essentially, opaque fencing around the construction.
No one
right?
can get hurt.
Right, okay.
And I've also seen in New York City where I work, they actually wallpaper it so it looks really cool, so it doesn't look like a construction site. So I can send a picture if anyone's interested. Oh, okay.
That's a good idea, thank you.
You can see it. Okay, and then my other thing is about the redevelopment process, is because we went through this once before, and we still have not seen what's actually going to be redeveloped. So I'd like to know what will, once a redevelopment deal is signed with a particular developer for a particularly larger projects, I'd like to see it presented to the public, so we could see it. Because right now, there's one going on, and we have no idea what's going on. And I would really like that to be done. Carol, can we see what's going on?
There's no agreement, you can share something.
Actually, Mike told me that there,
It's in the works. Don't
Okay.
hold that long, and feel it goes.
okay. 'Cause I have an email from Mike saying that there was a deal.
There's a tentative agreement.
Without
for
the
90 days.
proposal. Okay, I'll send it to you all. Okay.
Right.
But I'd like to know.
You're talking about conditional
Conditional,
Okay,
yes.
so this is a 4-page agreement, and all it did was, you're the conditional redeveloper. During the next 90 days, we're gonna work on the project, which we'll share with the public, and you're gonna pay the cost of the borough to look at it. There's no project yet. The project is not, they're still working on the design.
Okay, because, we're going on 250, it's 190 days and then an extra 90 days, so we're going
Yeah,
on
but
215 now.
That project is, which one's on that, Cal? That has.
No.
Codes. The codes, yeah. That one, there's nothing to see, you know what's gonna happen there, right?
Well, we don't know, no, we
There's
don't.
no project, no, it's just.
We don't know the height of the bulkhead, we don't know what the tax
Okay.
rebate was
So
gonna be,
that
we
one-
don't know the impact to the neighborhood, we know nothing.
That one is.
I would like to. No, it's about redevelopment, it isn't, totally. You don't wanna know what, I know, but I'm saying, and generally, you're talking about redevelopment, correct? That's what it said on the website, that it's about redevelopment. Okay.
Tell you that.
So, I should shut up and you can talk all you want.
Let me say this. That project is knee-deep in DEP review, okay? And that's what's taking up all the time. The DEP is in the process of working with the DEP to get.
Okay. And there's no actual plan? Yeah.
They're working at the DEP has ideas, they have ideas, and we're paying attention to make sure it's done right.
Okay.
But until the DEP tells you what the plans are.
Okay, but you will be doing that, is what I want to know. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, you can see there, it's much easier to move
Hi, Michelle Pizzulo, Highland Avenue. So I just want to be clear, the redevelopment will then change the master plan. So it's like a precursor for the master plan, or are you trying to fit the redevelopment plan into the master plan?
So the redevelopment plan is like the zone, not like the master plan. The master plan is this big sort of, idea about what should happen here, and you have zoning. This is more like the zoning, it's not like that.
It's still more zoning, and the master
Correct.
plan is more of the larger.
Yes, yes.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
I just wanted to ask, it hasn't been totally clear, if it's possible that if it's possible to have a design where, okay, well, the first house in is, 2 stories high, and the next one is 3, and the next one, that if you're talking about this view that we're talking about, like, is that how specific that this gets per property, or does every property have to have the same? Okay.
The beauty of redevelopment, so redevelopment is, one thing you can't do in zoning is called spot zoning, right? You can't take a piece of property and say, you're gonna be this, you're gonna be that. Redevelopment, you can do that. So we could say, this part, this piece, this block, for example, we're only gonna allow this height, this block, more height, absolutely have that flexibility, and I'm sure we'll be taking that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've written ordinances or redevelopment plans before where it's, you could have X number of stories, but only within 250 feet of this intersection or this, that distance from here. So absolutely. We haven't obviously come up with that yet here, but if that's something that's desired to do, yes.
And the other question I have is about future meetings, which is whether or not there's going to be public input on, as I think there should be on pilot or tax abatement, or what type of agreements going far into the future with.
No, the farm properties are absolutely 100%. The way that works is the developer makes a presentation to the professional team, your professional team, which is the financial advisor, us. We looked at, hundreds of them. We evaluate it, we do a lot of negotiation, we either recommend it or don't recommend it. And then there's a whole public process to get it done. It's by ordinance, 2 meetings, public hearings. There's some bagging, they have to show us open books, so I have to show the numbers, construction costs, pro formas, going out years and years. So, and we've got all those numbers before we even recommend it. So there's a huge process before we get anywhere close to recommending it.
And in general, that's with a developer rather than like the retailer themselves. I mean, I guess there's.
It's the owner.
Yeah.
You can't get to that until there's a plan that's formally done, right? You cannot have a redeveloper agreement or pilot agreement, so we're talking, the second the involvement, but it's not, we're beyond this process, it's yet another process, assuming there is a redevelopment designation and a redevelopment plan.
Because in the long term, that's really the benefit to the town, is that there's business here also for the town. It's not just.
Yeah, I mean, we could, maybe we only do it with retail. There's a lot of different ways to slice this.
And just to reiterate, these are all statutory provisions where nothing is being made up going along. There's a book about YAVIG that explains all of these things. And I think that's all I've got. Is there anything else that anyone else wants to make a comment on any of these different things that we've discussed? Sure.
Are the survey that you built, is that going to be able to be seen? Not the names on it, but what it is. My name is Kirk O'Neill, 224 Route 36, Hines. Okay, I got the mic out there. Hello? My question was, is the online survey going to be, are we going to be able to read all the comments afterwards?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good.
something has to be done, there's no doubt about it. But this has to be done very carefully. You guys have a big weight on your shoulders of what you're doing here. Because you gotta weigh the things we don't have against the things that we're looking to get and see where that balances out. You know, we have a big flood problem, there's no doubt about it. We have a density problem, we have a parking problem. And when you lay all, and that's what this is, in my opinion, this is density. Every 10 feet, every story you go up is another 10 foot. You know, so we want to put in 3 more stories of apartments, probably with 2 or 3 bedrooms, and that puts a density on here. The thought about regulating, I think somebody said, the parking or the ownership of a vehicle to be able to live there. Come on, man, really? You can't do that. It'd be one thing if, you know, if this was back in the day when people worked in town or worked locally. People work out of town, okay? So you gotta go out of town, so you gotta have parking, you have to have a place to put them. But the most important thing to me is, you can't negatively impact the people who live here or the people who are coming here. If you want to, can't do it. I'm not a soapbox here, I'm just telling you how I feel about it. You know, and saying, okay, we're at 38.5 with parking underneath, so 4 stories is 38, 48, that's 50. 5 stories is 60. I live on the hill up there, you know right where I live, and I don't want to look at a 60-foot house off the back of my deck. I don't want to do that, okay? And I don't think people in my neighborhood want to do that either. And this isn't just about Bay Avenue. This is about guys like me. This is about guys on 4th Street and 2nd Street, because you know what's going to happen with traffic? It's going to overflow. It's going to be in your yard now. And though you might say, well, it's not my backyard now, it'll be in your backyard, especially if it works the way you want it to work. You want an influx of people. You want this to be, some will say, basically a Pier Village. Believe me when I tell you, I work at Pier Village. I'm a fire protection guy, and it's always breaking down there. That's the last thing you want. The last thing you want is to walk past people that look the other way because they don't want to know you, because they're transient or they don't. They're not.
What's the question?
The question is, I have the microphone, that's all, okay, big boy? That's all. That's what the question is. All right, so I'll stop it there.
What I wanted to say is just to think about this development zone as the fact that it's in the middle of a whole area where people live. It's not like it's an industrial place, or it's not even downtown. It's where people live. So when you put the building real high, the person behind you, or the person next to you, the person across the street, they're losing their light. So I just think that when we're thinking about the height and we're thinking about how you're going to do different areas, that we are surrounded, the development zone is going to be surrounded by people who live there, and that's what has to be considered. Hi, Lorna Milbauer, Marina Bay. It made me very nervous when you started to say, well, you know, a developer's not going to want to come in and make any money if he can't build at least 5 stories. You sort of implied that. That way I sort of, that's what you heard. That's sort of what I inferred from what you said. And that makes me nervous, because yes, that's true. That's probably true of most developers. They don't live here, they don't have a sense of what Highlands is to so many of us. And that's making me really scared, because often money talks. And so I think we those of us who really care about this look of a village have to really try to rein this in from the very wealthy developers who just want to make money off of this whole deal.
Yeah.
So
I mean, what I'm trying to say is we could just not change the zone, right? See if it works. It's not working. So we're going to change the zoning somehow. What are the changes we're willing to do? Because there's no point in going through this whole process if we adopt the exact same zoning that exists today.
Well, I mean, what is broken here? I mean, we have lots that, we have, so when I come into town and I pass the lovely little shops down Waterwich, and then the hardware, what used to be the hardware store, that's a mess. And then there's what used to be the pub is gone, it's just an empty lot, and Welch's isn't all that attractive, and you know. So when you turn that corner down, you said, you know, what's not, you know, so attractive, the town starts to not look as lovely as it did. But what we don't want is, so to me, the fix is keeping it low, building something charming, and keeping the retail, and I don't see why that's such a difficult thing.
Well, it could happen now, it hasn't.
I know, but then, so that's why we have to reinvent the wheel because of that?
We're not trying to go crazy, I'm just saying, if we continue, we just leave it as is. Maybe something people think, oh, this hasn't changed, and maybe no, we don't make any changes at all.
Hi, Claudette Dorigo, 12 Seeker. Can I ask you, you're an attorney, correct? Can I ask you a question about this eminent domain that you said before? Because I'm reading something here that says, New Jersey law does not permit economic development takings, but as a practical matter, many municipal agencies in New Jersey use eminent domain to take properties under New Jersey's local redevelopment and housing law. And then it says below that, finally, unlike several other states, New Jersey does not provide for the recovery of landowners' attorney fees, expert witness fees, and costs in defending the condemnation action and in advocating for full just compensation, except for inverse condemnation matters. So my question to you is, you're saying that, and I know that's a question for a lot of people, this eminent domain issue. So you're saying, no, you're not going to do eminent domain under the redevelopment, but under another law in the state of New Jersey, municipalities are permitted to then condemn a piece of property that a homeowner owns. Or at least that's what I'm reading.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
If you're referring to like build a road or a school or a park, yeah, municipalities can do that.
But you're saying emphatically that they cannot do that with somebody's home? Or can?
No, if they want to build a park, on the redevelopment plan, this is a non-condemnation area. So we cannot use condemnation to take your property and give it to someone to build a redevelopment project.
But you can, according to this, do it under the New Jersey local redevelopment and housing
In
law.
order to do it, the law has steps. Step one is declare it as an area in need of redevelopment with condemnation powers. And then you can do that. Or if you declare it as an area of redevelopment without condemnation powers like we did, you can't do that.
You absolutely cannot do that. Okay, so I think a lot of people are concerned.
Absolutely.
Hi, Russ Chalak, 3 Washington. Is it normal for a town to take this long to basically repair itself after a hurricane? And I'm thinking there's still damaged storefronts from Hurricane Irene. Is it normal for a town to take this long to have a redevelopment plan to fix things up?
It took decades in some towns, so I don't know what to do to fix something downtown, but Hurricane Sandy, the place they're still on fix, so, yeah.
All right, but are there other shore towns that are in the same predicament as Highlands? I'm looking around, I see Atlantic Highlands got fixed up, Seabright got fixed up.
Can't make a fair tax. Well, not Atlantic Highlands.
I think it's time to get it done.
Okay, we gotta wrap this up.
Okay, this is very brief. Last clause, guys.
Maureen Goodbrook, I just want to ask, are we going to be able to have access to that map you showed us in the beginning that it is there? That outlines the district? Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
Nancy Burton, 22 Atlantic Street, 69 Waterwich, business owner. I just wanted to reiterate a few things. I'd like you to you do have an important job, and you should focus on the focus areas. Some areas can have higher heights, some areas need to stay more quaint and residential. That is going to be a major task at hand, I think, with what you're doing. As a retail business owner, I am excited for more units. I am excited for more residents. They are the people who come and shop. And so those second and third story apartments and new people moving into town, they are going to be who will help these businesses stay in business and also have us have more businesses throughout the town.
Great, thank you.
All right, Steve, why don't you close us out? Here you go.
Thinking towards the future, all right, I know it's not on the the list of things and everything else that we have, but, you know, when we talk about building, and creating retail spaces, and bringing businesses in, you know, I'd like some consideration to be given to the vehicle that is used to attract these businesses, okay? I know that we've been assessed a business tax in the past, okay, and it really only benefited a very few, okay? I'd like to have a discussion about how that's gonna happen, okay? I know that where I come from in Middlesex County, they've got a great marketing firm that they just hired that's, you know, doing a great job on TV and everything else. And I think that what we've had here in the past has been a failure for a number of businesses due to the lack of understanding of the other businesses that existed. So I'd like that to be considered as we go forward. And that'll be it. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Just keep the flooding. Who's that?
All right. Thank you very much for your input. We look forward to the next steps.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second it. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Stand up. Oh, Jay, tell me, yeah.